Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 75 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Gavin, and that is Mike and Fia. And as per usual, because I am introing the episode, I don't have much to do today, ideally, because this episode is a Mike Takes the Wheel episode where Mike is going to teach us something about history. I haven't even seen the Google Doc yet, so hopefully it's something good.
Yeah, I mean, that would kind of suck if it wasn't.
No, they're always good. I've always really enjoyed all of your episodes.
So I only do this, about every 10 episodes, and now it's kind of formalized. Every 10 episodes, we do a Mike Takes the Wheel episode. And every time I get to a point where like, man, this is a lot of, I don't want to do this anymore. And then just like preparing for the show. And then I realize that all the other times, Gavin, you're the one that has to actually set up everything. I'm like, you know what? I should really stop my complaining and just figure out what I want to talk about. The hardest part about this is always choosing the topic. Once I have a cool topic,
right.
then everything else kind of flows from there. But today's gonna be a Mike Takes the Wheel episode, which I'm very
also
much looking
quick
forward
plug.
to.
If you listeners would like to help us with that topic, there's a form
absolutely.
to request topics down below. Please do our work for us. And now, since we have 3 regular hosts who all host, recurring segments, you can request something from either 3 of us. That'd be pretty cool. So, links to that down below.
Absolutely.
So, today we're going to be doing Swamp Corner to start with. Then I'm going to have a little spiel about something cool going on in paleontology right now, and then we're going to get into the main Mike segment of it. So, Fia, what do you have for us today for Swamp Corner?
Well, wait a minute. Before we even get there, do we even introduce Fia?
Right.
Hey.
Do we even introduce Fia for this episode? I feel
I said
And Fia.
I said that's Mike and that's Fia, and then Mike started talking.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't forget about Fia, because that I know I've done that a couple of times as I've introed the episode. I've just forgot Fia's name, so I want to make sure we didn't do that. So Fia,
I really don't think you ever have.
Not that I've noticed.
Yeah, no. I think we're good.
Fair enough. Fia, start talking.
All right. So today on Swamp Corner, I would like to talk about what I did this weekend. First, I would like to ask both.
Sure.
I think I know where you were this weekend. Was it a swamp?
No, actually, it's not.
Oh, bummer.
I feel lied to.
Sorry, it's
swamp adjacent corner.
Yeah, swamp adjacent corner. We're branching out, okay?
Swamp kitty corner, if you will.
Yeah. Anyways, first thoughts on Mississippi. What do you guys think? What are your impressions?
It's a long river.
And so the state or the river?
All around. Just geographically, what do you think of in Mississippi?
So just for context, I confuse Mississippi and Arkansas a lot for some reason.
Oh no, that's not.
I know it's not a good comparison either way. Well,
at least I could understand Mississippi and Alabama, but
because I always think that Mississippi is farther up on the Mississippi River than it is.
Oh.
So
no.
We had a trivia question at our local bar trivia here that asked for how many states are landlocked. And I was like, cool. So you count all the ones on the coasts and you work backward from there. And for some reason I thought Arkansas and Mississippi were on the Gulf, and they are not.
No.
Just
not.
Mississippi.
Right.
So that is the extent of my Mississippi knowledge.
Great. Mike?
I am mostly remembering a Reddit thread that I just quickly pulled up after you asked that question.
Awesome.
What is the worst U.S. state and why?
Oh.
Now.
Okay, that's fair.
Right, you two both know I have a long-standing bias against Delaware.
That is true.
But
right.
you don't count that as a state, so it makes sense that wouldn't count as
correct.
The worst state.
Of course. So, but in this thread, normally on a Reddit thread, for questions like this, you have different answers, and people are proposing, it could be this, it could be that, and different reasons. For this, just all the way down, every answer, Mississippi.
Oh, no.
Wait, it's not Mississippi. This should be besides Mississippi. What is the worst U.S. state? Wow, Mississippi is really getting effed so hard by this thread. Just all the way down. It's
what year is this thread?
2021.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
Yes. So
Well,
I remembered seeing it, and so I don't know much about Mississippi other than just like the general assumed racism of that
yeah,
general
right.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm hoping you're gonna give me something better to talk about with Mississippi.
So those were the general impressions that I had as well of Mississippi because I'm just like a northerner and I know nothing about like the South, so they all just like
Right.
blur together. And so I was like, oh, like my friend for her birthday, she wanted to go to Mississippi to go to this nature spot that I will say in a second, but she was like, yeah, Mississippi's great, like blah blah blah. And I was like, what do you mean Mississippi's great? Like they've just got like shit roads and like it's like the middle of nowhere all the way through. And she's like, no, there's so much everywhere. And apparently, um, the roads are so much better in Mississippi now than they are in Louisiana for some reason. As soon
Really?
as you
Is okay,
cross the
question though.
border,
How low is that bar?
yeah, the bar's low. The
Okay,
bar is very low.
is the bar the floor?
Yeah.
Okay. Because
Right.
like I've driven across many states,
Right.
and in general, I'd say they all have decent to okay roads.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would say that for Louisiana. I've never been there,
No.
but just the vibe that I get that
Just
the swamp.
assume no.
Yeah, the swamp is constantly trying to reclaim the roads.
Oh yeah. 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 But anyways, a new spot that I recently discovered in Mississippi is called Red Bluff, Mississippi, which is also colloquially known as Mississippi's Little Grand Canyon.
Oh, okay.
And I shit you not, like this thing looked like a real canyon. It looked like actual altitude of climbing and such. We had to do a lot of climbing to kind of go through the bluff and get down to where and what created it, the Pearl River, because the Red Bluff is a formation created by erosion from the Pearl River, which I believe
Mhm.
is an extension off of the Mississippi River.
Like a tributary or something, or
Yeah, not 100% sure. Just pulling
okay.
that
I mean, it would make sense
right,
being
but
that close.
yeah, it was super cool because the soil was like obviously where it gets its name, red,
Hmm.
and it was really sandy and almost when it got wetter towards the river, it turned into like clay, and so you could literally like rub it on your hands and like roll it into balls like pottery, and yeah, it was really cool to go explore that and see that Mississippi isn't all that I've thought it was in a bad way.
Good.
But yeah.
And so,
That's really
how long were
cool.
you there for?
I was just there for the day. We just took a day trip. It's only 2 hours away from where I live, so
Okay.
definitely day trippable. Um,
Cool.
but yeah, it was super cool. We also saw this really cool clam that like had moved itself up onto the shore, and you could kind of see like the little path it dug itself in the sand too.
Huh.
So
Why would a
yeah,
clam do that?
they move. They're
Right,
not
but like
sedentary.
I know, but like onto land.
It was like at the edge of where the water meets the
Okay.
land. I don't know why it would do that other than to maybe avoid predators or like get out of some sort of anoxic or like like very low
Mm-hmm.
or poor nutrient situation that was gonna kill it.
Hmm.
I don't know. That is
Desperate
a good
little,
question.
desperate little clam.
Yeah,
Poor guy.
yeah, right. But that's all I have for today. Red
Cool.
Bluff,
So
check it
nice.
out.
Yeah. Any Mississippian listeners? I'm sorry that we just dunked really hard on your state. I
Right.
apologize for that, but also I don't. Uh, little sarcasm there, but it's nice to know that there is some cool nature in your state. I feel like every
Yes.
state has some cool nature if you know where to go.
Right.
You know what state doesn't have cool nature?
What state?
Who?
Delaware.
Delaware.
I mean, they have a coast. I bet the beaches are kind of okay.
That's what everybody says. People are like, "Oh, I'm going to go to the beaches in Delaware. The beaches are so nice." Man, there's beaches everywhere. All right. That's a cop-out answer. People say the beaches in Delaware. No, they're not. First off.
Okay. I've never been,
All
so I
right.
can't confirm or deny.
Right.
We should do a whole episode on Delaware, but we're not going to. Before we quite get started with my stuff, Gavin, I believe you had a quick thing that you wanted to contribute for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if anybody is active on the paleontology corners of social media, you've probably
I think
noticed
I know one person that is.
that would be me. You probably have noticed a lot going on this week in particular. Not for any new papers published, new discoveries or anything, but a new documentary series has been premiering all of this week.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it is called Prehistoric Planet. And
Yeah.
did you guys ever see Walking with Dinosaurs when you were kids?
I think so.
It came out in I think 99
No.
or 2000,
Okay.
but it
It's
was
ringing a bell.
wildly popular. It was produced by the BBC, using like the best computer graphics available at the time, as well as like the most up-to-date scientific information available at the time. And it was really groundbreaking for sort of, obviously, Jurassic Park came out in 1993, which obviously is not a documentary, but it renewed so much interest in dinosaurs that a lot of dinosaurs.
Correction. Not a documentary yet.
Fair. Okay. But inspired a lot more stuff to be done, that there really is a big market for, relatively accurate, because even for its time, Jurassic Park got a lot of stuff wrong that they knew was wrong at the time, but did update a lot of the popular stereotypes about dinosaurs. And so things like Walking with Dinosaurs sought to do that, but actually get as much right as they possibly could. And so it's been 22, maybe 23 years. I don't remember exactly when that came out. But the BBC decided to make another sort of spiritual successor to Walking with Dinosaurs called Prehistoric Planet. It's narrated by David Attenborough, so you know it's going to be amazing.
Oh, you know it's going to be so amazing.
And so they've been premiering one episode a day all of this week. So if you are listening to this on the day this goes out, episode 3 will be available today. The only downside is that it's only on Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
So
That's where
not
I
one
have
of
not been able to watch it.
not one of the most widely adopted streaming platforms, but I'm here to let you know, Apple TV Plus has a free 7-day trial.
Ooh.
That's what I did, and I've been watching it all this week. And as soon as the 5th episode premieres and I watch it, I'm gonna cancel. So, I think it's really important to support these kinds of things, because there's also been a lot of discourse on the internet about Prehistoric Planet that, like, and just in general with around specifically dinosaurs, and this is a big reason why I don't particularly like doing things about dinosaurs, but people are too sentimentally attached to the vision of dinosaurs that they had when they were little. So there's a bunch of people who are like, oh, these dinosaurs being fluffy and feathered is unmasculine, and they shouldn't be good caring parents, they should be raging death machines. And that's not how they were. They're animals, and we should be depicting them as animals, which this documentary is really great at doing.
That's awesome.
And they even are doing a little bit of like speculative stuff. So for example, in episode 2, they have a segment of a herd of sauropods, the big long-necked dinosaurs that we talked about in some past episode that I don't remember what number it was. But the big long neck, little foot dinosaurs. And it's very, very well known that they have big air sacs in their bones that help them circulate air on their bodies, probably to help keep them cool, because when you're that big, you just run really hot, and running really hot is generally bad. So they have lots of air sacs kind of all over their body. So what this documentary sort of proposed for one species, and that to my knowledge there's no actual evidence for this particular thing that they showed, but they showed big air sacs all up and down the neck that they would like inflate to try and display while looking for mates. And there are lots of birds that do that. So it would make sense that a dinosaur would have this, but we don't know specifically that one does. But it's neat to just depict them in ways that are different while not being, like different than you've seen before, but not potentially being accurate.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of, you kind of have a path to choose. You can either lean toward, not that you can't do both, but you can either lean towards being just entertaining, or you can lean towards being more accurate. And if you can, lean towards being more accurate while still being entertaining when possible, well, then that seems to accomplish quite a few goals.
Exactly. And like I said, all those people who were complaining are basically saying that having dinosaurs be feathered and good parents makes them not entertaining anymore, which, like, people go out in nature to look at animals doing that all the time, so clearly it is entertaining.
Yeah.
And I don't understand what's wrong with those people.
If it's not entertaining, oh well.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, just I don't know. Dinosaurs don't exist for your entertainment, or didn't exist for your entertainment, I suppose.
Exactly, and that's the big thing. I'm like, if you want a giant scaly monster that's just gonna destroy things and wreak havoc, go watch like a dragon fantasy movie, because that's
Right.
what you actually want.
Yes, exactly. So very cool. And that is, what's the name of that one more time?
Prehistoric Planet, and we'll put a link to like its page on Apple TV Plus as well if you want to check it out and potentially sign up for the free 7-day. I'm not trying to shill for any company, especially Apple, but the 7-day free trial, as long as you cancel it, does nothing but educate you about some cool dinosaur stuff.
Perfect, and you can watch some Ted Lasso while you're there.
Absolutely. We might keep it for the first month just to watch Ted Lasso, because I have heard that it's pretty good.
It is. My general thoughts on Ted Lasso, really good. I'm glad I'm watching it. I don't quite get the hype why it got so big, but I still really enjoy it, and it's worth a watch.
Cool.
All right, so and I think we are ready for my end of this. And so, question to both you guys as we get started for Mike Takes the Wheel Volume 7 here. Are you guys familiar with the American Civil War?
Yeah.
I think that I may have heard of it.
Yeah, it was a thing that happened. That's true.
I do not feel like I'm on the good side right now.
I mean, I feel like there were people that lived in the South that were not super pro-slavery. There must have been some, right?
There was, in fact, at least 4 million people in the South that were not super pro-slavery.
Is that what we're talking about?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Not exactly. So we have sort of preempted my next leading question. I was going to ask, why was the Civil War fought? Which, of course, was...
slavery.
Slavery.
I'm sorry if you were told something else in high school. It was slavery.
Yeah,
for sure.
Last year I had a seventh grader that was really excited to tell me like the Civil War was fought over states' rights, and I just look at her right in her stupid little soul, and I was just like, a states' right to do what? That is the question. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, right. If anybody here wants to talk about tariffs and anything, I'm plenty happy to talk about 1832. But we're not going to talk about 1832. We're talking about the Civil War here. We're not actually talking about the Civil War here, though. So, spoiler alert when it comes to the Civil War. And actually, if I may, I'll back up for a second here. I kind of wanted to do for this Mike Takes the Wheel Volume 7 something that was a little bit more complicated, because so far in our 6 episodes, we've done kind of mostly, I won't quite say heroes, but kind of like unheard of protagonists throughout history.
Sure.
And I kind of wanted to do something that was a little bit more complicated for an episode. And I tried to do, there was different people I was kind of knocking around, and for various reasons, I didn't choose any of them, although I may choose them in the future. But so I wanted to, I definitely want to do something different. So today's episode, just as a forewarning, is not going to be like a super, here's a cool person from history episode. It's also not going to be any individual person. We're going to be learning about a group of people today, which I'm really looking forward to. Okay. But so back to the Civil War, and after the Civil War, the Union wins, the North wins. What happens to all those 4 million slaves in the South?
I don't know.
Well, they on paper get freed, but in practice, not as much, to my knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So there was this the system called sharecropping that was set up so that way, so what it was, free blacks now in the South, former slaves, would wind up oftentimes working the exact same fields as when they were slaves. And there was this kind of illusion of freedom. If they worked really hard and were able to make enough money in any given year, they would be able to pay off their debts and leave and go somewhere else. And it was always kind of
Why were
running
they
on a
in
treadmill.
debt?
Because what ended up happening was they had to rent out the equipment they were using and their lodging and everything from their these former slave masters, now just plantation owners.
Right.
So,
it was
right.
sort of, I know a very like people who try to water down slavery, something they talk about a lot is like how bad like Irish immigrants were treated with their like indentured servitude when they came to the United States. And so it's kind of like I know something that's a common sort of talking point by people who tend to water down slavery, people coincidentally who kind of say that the Civil War was about states' rights, that like how badly the Irish immigrants were treated when they came to the United States and like the indentured servitude that they got through to go here. Like sharecropping was adjacent to that because you were indebted to this person just because you were basically forced to live with them because you didn't have any other option.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's effectively how I kind of understood sharecropping. But I mean, you're the one who did the research for this, so let us know.
Well, today's episode is not entirely about sharecropping, so I don't want to get too bogged down in it. I just want to reinforce the point that after the Civil War, this was this is kind of one of the problems when it comes to the abolition of slavery and just the institution of it is, okay, once we're trying to get rid of slavery and we've agreed, okay, that's the thing that's going to happen, what you wind up doing, it's kind of the what do you do on Tuesday problem. Okay, great. But now you have all of these people, most of whom are reasonably unskilled outside of plantations. What ends up happening to those people? And so sharecropping, essentially going back to do the same work they had, was was one of the most common things that happened. There was the Freedmen's Bureau that was set up that operated as a U.S. government agency to try and help train these new free blacks and give them skills, educate them, and try and give them that step up. That was an option. The other main option, at least that I'm aware of, was the United States military.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so during the Civil War, there were segregated units that were formed, and this makes some amount of sense. We're finally going to allow black soldiers to fight, but this is still 1865 here, so we're not quite at integration yet. They were known as the U.S. Colored Troops, and they were disbanded in 1865 as the war ended. But 2 years after that, the U.S. military was authorized to create 2 cavalry and then 4 infantry divisions, and ended up becoming 2 infantry divisions that was dedicated just to black soldiers. They were mostly through the 1870s led by white officers, and then eventually the first black commissioned officer led the unit in 1877. And until
I mean,
from 1870,
that's an earlier year than I thought you were gonna say. So
yeah, it's it happens reasonably soon after the Civil War, and from 1870 through 1898, black soldiers were about 10% of the army, give or take, depending on the year. Which again, if we're kind of trying to era adjust, all right, that's not as bad as I may have thought.
Okay.
So now, what I want to ask you guys: so there are these, there are these new regiments of black soldiers. Why on earth are they famous enough for me to be bringing them up on this podcast 150 years later? Because it was not just that there were these divisions created just for black soldiers. What was going on with the United States military at this time that would lead them to becoming famous?
1890s, you say?
So after the Civil War, so call it 1870s up through up through 1900-ish.
I got nothing.
I'm just gonna guess one of 2 options. Either they did something real cool, or they were treated real bad. Then those are not mutually exclusive.
You're 100% correct. They are not mutually exclusive. They are. So you are correct I guess on both accounts, but you are not entirely correct. You were leaving stuff
Okay.
out. There was
Mhm.
obvious, and I don't have too much about this in my notes because it's almost so obvious as to not deserve mention. But the racism that was experienced
Right.
by these black soldiers in the military is is expected, and I'm not sure how much time needs to be spent on it on this particular podcast. They also did some cool stuff, which I'll talk about at the end. However, during this period of time, the United States government had legal control over most of the lower 48 states that
Hmm.
we're familiar with today. However, they still wanted to move their white settlers onto all of that land. And so we have what has become known as the Indian Wars that take
Mhm.
place during this time. And the Indian Wars are almost exactly what it sounds like, where the United States government, it was not any formal war, but the United States government would over time engage in battles with various Native American nations in order to take their land and move these Native American Indians onto
Oh.
reservations.
Right. War.
Yeah.
War to me kind of implies at least a little bit of like an equal footing
Mm-hmm.
that like either side could win. That wasn't war.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the Indian Wars, that's the term that's become applied to this. You could go so far as to call it a genocide in many respects. And
Wow.
this is part of where I'm talking about the complicated legacy of these black soldiers comes in because they served, I don't want to say necessarily honorably in relation here, but they were very good soldiers and fought very well in the American Southwest and the Great Plains regions. Um, they were uh, they won nearly every battle that they fought in, and this is where these black soldiers get the name Buffalo Soldiers, and that's the name they've become known by today. I don't
Okay.
know if either of you have ever heard that term before, Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah,
I
I definitely
haven't.
have. And especially living in South Dakota, I've definitely seen that around.
Yeah, and so it was during the American Indian Wars that the that name originated, Buffalo Soldiers, and it's still a little bit unclear exactly how that name winds up getting applied to black soldiers. The Apache used the term Buffalo Soldiers because they had curly, kinking hair like a bison, um, which has been repeated by other people. And there's various other explanations for how the Buffalo Soldiers get their name. And it winds up becoming a term that gets applied to all black service members, particularly during those segregated years.
Hmm.
And there's not too much to say, about this if you're familiar at all with the American Indian Wars, and there are plenty of places to find out more about that. You will know the United States government, slaughtered and forcibly relocates millions of Native Americans to various reservations. Um, and the Buffalo Soldiers play a part in that, and it is one of those complicating legacies of, you know, well, what else were these, now free slaves going to do? Their options were reasonably limited, and this was a way for them to, to escape plantations and make some money, and work with other black soldiers. And far be it from me to tell former escaped slaves how, or I shouldn't say escaped slaves, former free slaves how to live their lives. On the other hand, boy, the American Indian Wars do not look good in retrospect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sort of um, the low point of the Buffalo Soldiers legacy. However, there was other stuff going on. The United States fights a war in 1898. Do either of you have a guess as to who the United States fights? This is a more formalized war.
1898. That sounds roughly the time period that we took over control of the Philippines.
Oh, right idea. Before the Philippines was part of the Philippine American War was sort of gets wrapped into a larger war.
Um, I very uh, ignorantly want to say France for some reason, but I know that's probably not right.
I am always in favor of war with France, but it was not France.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it was not France. You were close, though. I believe this country borders France, although I don't actually know how Europe works.
Okay. Same.
If it's bordering France, you've got like four options.
Let me see here. It
No, that's not
does
quite true.
border.
Maybe like 5-6 options.
I don't, but this country does border France. Any final guesses?
No.
So then it would be Spain or Germany based on the time period.
We are talking about the Spanish-American
Okay.
War. Good work, Gavin, for
Ah.
finally getting there. And so, is it Spain owns? This was not a war where the U.S. goes into Spain itself, but Spain owns some territories in the Caribbean, primarily Cuba. And the Spanish-American War is way more fascinating than it has any right to be. And there are other places you can learn about that. However, the Buffalo Soldiers um, become become partially famous for being the only Black Americans to fight in Cuba during that war. They fought at the famous Battle of San Juan Hill, and this
Okay.
is part of where I got the idea for this episode, because if anyone knows anything about the Buffalo Soldiers, or pardon me, about the Spanish American War, it's usually this is where Teddy Roosevelt shows up in people's minds.
Oh, okay.
And Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders show up and fight in the Battle of San Juan Hill, and help take over Cuba in like a matter of months. The Spanish American War in Cuba is, it's a mercy rule at that point, and the Americans are able to take over Cuba. And I was going to originally do this on the Rough Riders, but I feel like most people have heard of the Rough Riders. The Buffalo Soldiers come in, and this is where, Gavin, you're correct. The Philippine American War comes shortly after the war in Cuba, because once the U.S. takes over Cuba, there was not too much resistance at that point. However, the U.S. also got control of the Philippines in the Spanish American War, and the Buffalo Soldiers, in addition to various other regiments, were sent over to the Philippines to try and take over there. And there was much more resistance in the Philippines to the U.S. just showing up and trying to take the land. And I'm going to quote here from Wikipedia. The Buffalo Soldier regiments took part in the Philippine American War from 1899 to 1903. There was strong opposition to the war in the Philippines among African Americans. Many black soldiers established a rapport with the, and I'm again quoting here, the brown-skinned natives on the land, and an unusually large number of black troops deserted during the campaign, some of whom joined the Filipino rebels. Which, again, not that I'm encouraging troop desertion here, but the Philippine American War isn't exactly like a good thing the United States did.
Right.
With any research that people have done, and the fact that, again, these Black Americans found some kinship with the Philippine Americans, kind of seeing their struggle after living in the United States, and many of whom deciding to join with these Filipinos. It's kind of a cool twist, and it begs more questions about the conduct during the American Indian Wars, but it is. Again, it kind of shows the complicated legacy of the Philippine Americans, where in different places they behave kind of differently. So that is most of what I want to talk about when it comes to wars. The Buffalo Soldiers continue to exist as a regiment up throughout World War II. However, there's other stuff they do besides just fighting. Do any of you guys have any clue what else soldiers could be useful for, particularly during this time? This is I don't expect you guys to get this question.
Building
Working?
things?
Yeah.
I like what you're thinking. No.
Then, nah, yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so I didn't expect you guys to have too much. And Gavin, this is going to be kind of special for me to bring this up with you in particular, and you'll see why in just a second. But the Buffalo Soldiers become some of the very first national park rangers that the country ever had.
What?
Oh.
It gets cooler, because these regiments were serving in the California Sierra Nevada region, where they became some of the first soldiers. Can you name two of the national parks that they first began serving in?
In fact, I'll name you three.
Yeah,
Because they're all fairly close. It'd be Sequoia National Park, Kings
That's
Canyon
one of them.
National Park,
yep,
where Mike and I recorded an episode about Ice Age, and Yosemite National Park,
exactly.
where we didn't say
Yep.
this at the beginning, but where I actually just got married this past weekend.
Aw.
So
Once I saw that, I couldn't stop laughing. the Buffalo Soldiers become some of the first, the nation's first park rangers in the 2 national parks I've ever been to with Gavin, and the park that Gavin just got married in, like, I don't know, 6 hours ago or whatever it was. It just, it blew my mind
Coincidence?
that I got
I
that
think
lucky. I don't know. I don't know. The Buffalo Soldiers are looking down on me or something.
Right.
Cool.
So, and so the Army had been serving in these national parks since 1891, but it took until 1899 before there was any black soldiers that were actually serving as these rangers. The black soldiers served mostly during the summer, and they actually, me calling them park rangers, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here because the National Park Service wasn't created until 1916. So these
Right.
were park rangers before the term was actually officially in use.
Huh.
And the main lasting legacy of the Buffalo Soldiers can be seen in one of the most famous characters from national parks, who is a famous cartoon character related to national parks. Gavin, I know you can get this one.
Smokey the Bear?
Smokey the Bear
Is it actually Smokey the Bear?
That's exactly who I'm talking about.
Wow.
I'm talking about Smokey the Bear. And Gavin, can you describe the attire of Smokey the Bear for me? I'm going to really play this game hard with you.
Well, he wears like a ranger hat that's, very wide brimmed and has like a
Yes.
sort of belt in the middle of it.
Yes.
Famously, no shirt. And then pants and a belt buckle, like jeans.
Exactly. And I want to talk about the hat right now because one of the lasting legacies of the Buffalo Soldiers can be seen with the hats that they wore, that Smokey the Bear now wears today in the various promotions, because while it wasn't officially adopted by the Army until 1911, that hat crease at the top of Smokey the Bear's hat, called a Montana pinch, and if you have a chance, just look up a picture of Smokey the Bear and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Or if you don't, if you're just listening to this on your commute, it almost sort of looks like a very blunted top of a Phillips head screwdriver.
Ooh, that's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. And so these can be seen in Buffalo Soldiers in park photographs going all the way back to at least 1899. And these soldiers in the Spanish American War wore their hats like this. They were able to recrease their hats and kind of make those, I'll call it a point, but make those in hats because it was way better. The rain would roll off the hats way easier with those creases. And that was eventually adopted by the Army a little bit over a decade later, and exists on today with park rangers and with Smokey the Bear.
I was gonna say so for the wedding, my parents and my sister were able to come out, and every time that we, mostly like me and now my wife, go to national parks, we always pick up something for. I have a little niece, and so we picked her up one of those hats.
Did you really?
Yeah, we did. That says Yosemite National Park on it, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of one of those things. I'm not sure anybody thinks about where that specific hat comes from, and finding out a backstory like that always brings kind of a smile to my face to see that there is a story behind that. So that is
cool.
there's plenty of other stories with the Buffalo Soldiers that exist, but I will sort of wrap this up here. The Buffalo Soldiers continued serving in the U.S. military up through World War II. And then during the Korean War, the U.S. military was integrated under President Truman. And that was during the 1950s. And so the Buffalo Soldiers term, was no longer needed, was no longer in use because, it applied to these segregated units of the military. But that sort of begs a question. So these Buffalo Soldiers were serving, up through World War II. Do you guys have a guess as to when the last Buffalo Soldier died? None of them are still living, which is why we can.
I was gonna say like a trick question. I was like, is there still one?
I would, as much as I would love to do that, that's kind of the only rule we have with our podcast is that the people have to be dead. So when do you guys think the last Buffalo Soldier died, and how old do you think they were? We'll see who can get closer.
Okay.
So it was World War II. I mean, there were a couple World War II veterans like in the town that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna say like while we were alive for sure.
Correct. So post 1990s.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna say 1999, and they were 89.
Okay, so we
I was
have
I was
1999
thinking
and 89.
I was thinking roughly there. I was thinking maybe like 2001, maybe.
Uh huh.
One.
So I was gonna say two, and then one came out. And I'm gonna say like 90 years old. I'm gonna be that
Gavin,
guy that just one ups Fia.
Yeah, I was gonna say your Price is Writing her here, and it worked out for you.
Cool.
You are closer on both accounts. So
Yeah.
So Mark Matthews was the last living Buffalo Soldier. He died in 2005. Neither of you are anywhere close on his age.
No.
The man lived to be 111 years old.
Wow.
Wow.
111 years old.
Good for
Yeah.
him.
Absolutely, and it's similar to many of these old wars, with World War II or Holocaust survivors. Now, what I can appreciate now is, while most of them are no longer with us, there are a handful of Holocaust survivors and World War II soldiers that are still kicking around. But for the most part, they are gone. But they lived long enough to be able to tell their stories, and not just have somebody like write them down, but like there are interviews and videos you can watch with real Buffalo Soldiers, to hear them tell their side of the story and what actually happened. And so, if you get a chance, do a little bit of your own research on Buffalo Soldiers and kind of learn about what they were all about, what they did, and what it was like serving in the military, at a time when it was segregated, because it was basically a lifetime ago, or close to it. And that is
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of the story of the Buffalo Soldiers. I wanted to do a group of people and people with sort of a complicated legacy, and it can be sort of uncomfortable to talk about this, where these really great fighters, freed slaves, working in America that still would not treat them as equal, and also this complicated legacy with but they went about treating American Indians not in ways that many of them have been treated not that long before. And so it's this
Right.
wonderful, complicated American legacy where things are not neat and tidy, and you cannot just put a thumbs up or thumbs down on the Buffalo Soldiers. And that's part of what I really like about learning about things along these lines in American history and world history, is that it's not always neat and tidy, and that's kind of the point sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is all I have here for Mike Takes the Wheel Volume 7 on the Buffalo Soldiers.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Mike. This was a really good one. Like you
Mhm.
said, history is complicated and messy, and nobody is
Mhm.
wholly good or wholly bad, with very few exceptions. Looking at you, Hitler. And so, no, it's really good to talk about some of the more complicated parts of, all that American history is.
Yeah.
So thanks, Mike, and thanks, Fia, for giving us a new retrospect, or a new
Yeah.
perspective on
Mississippi.
on a state that I don't think has ever been mentioned on this podcast before.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want a new perspective on Mississippi. I'm comfortable just.
Oh, come on.
Well,
Right,
I mean, actually, looking at my map, there is no national park there, so I will likely never go there.
Oh, okay.
But anyway,
we'll have to make a trip and visit Fia for the next Swamp Corner.
Exactly. Maybe we'll stop in Red Bluff just to be like, okay, I did a thing in Mississippi.
Yep.
Now I can cross it off my list.
Yeah, exactly.
I survived Mississippi.
And all I got was this handful of red mud.
Yeah.
And that's what we call going for full circle. Thank you, everybody, for
Full
listening.
circle indeed.
Make sure to check out all of our links to suggest some new topics so that Mike, Fia, and I can do less work thinking up topics. And thank you, Mike, for preparing this episode. And this was episode 75 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. I have been Gavin, and that has been Mike and Fia. And we will see you all next week. This episode of I Wish You Were Dead was written by Mike Bryson and hosted by Gavin Davidson, Mike Bryson, and Fenella Campanino. It was sound edited by Mike Bryson and edited for YouTube by Gavin Davidson. Special thanks to former guests of the pod and to listeners like you.